When we don't stand up for victims in this House, we should all hang our heads in shame. And I hope every single one of them goes back to caucus and ask why that speech said what it said. Why are we allowing this to happen? Shame on every parliamentarian who does not fight for victims of sexual offenses in this country.
This video covers a parliamentary debate on Bill C-246. It involves criminal legislation, including sensitive topics like violent crime and assaults. I will only discuss what is necessary to understand the policies and public interests. This is so important. Share this video with every single person that you know. Everybody needs to see this video in Canada. This debate was over 2 hours long, and what I've done is I've shortened it to just 30 minutes and only included the most important information for you to see. You will not see any of this information anywhere else. I'm the only one that's reporting on this news. I will be providing everybody my regular news segment, Rapid Fire News, tomorrow morning, so stay tuned for that one. But right now, let's get into this report.
And walk away with a deal. The moment you realize you're paying a little bit less than maybe what you were expecting. Maybe it's 15% off of your favorite boots or favorite shoes. Maybe it's buy one, get the other one half off. Or maybe it's hitting the jackpot, buy one and you get the other thing free. You know, here, especially at Christmas time, these sorts of deals tend to attract people. They tend to get us into a storefront. We love a bargain. We love getting more value than what we pay for. Discounts are a part of everyday life, and especially a part of this season. And they bring a thrill when we're able to spot them and take advantage of them. But as great as these discounts are, I would offer that they belong in stores alone. They do not belong in our justice system. The practice of treating serious crimes like they are items on sale is not just misguided, but it's altogether dangerous, it's unjust, and it's completely detached from the experience of victims who will never receive a discount on the trauma that they experience and live with. Unfortunately, in our current justice system, discounts are handed out far too often in criminal sentencing. One of the biggest and most troubling discounts granted under Canadian law is concurrent sentencing. In other words, it offers an offender the opportunity to serve multiple sentences under one. Instead of facing real consequences for each act of harm, they serve all sentences at the same time. One sentence, multiple crimes, equals drastically reduced jail time. And if this logic were applied anywhere else in life, I think we would be outraged. We'd call it absurd. But in Canada's courts, somehow it is common practice. And even more troubling is that this discount is applied to some of the most egregious crimes, including mass murder or serial sexual assault. And today, I will focus on the latter, to do with my private member's bill. Sexual assault crimes are not minor offenses. They are not mistakes. These are acts that rob individuals of their dignity, their agency, and their sense of safety and well-being. They can alter the course of a person's life, not just for a few weeks or a few months, but forever. Yet the perpetrators of such deeply violating crimes often walk away with sentences that fail to reflect the severity of the harm they've caused. Concurrent sentencing should never be allowed for such crime, which is why I'm proud to address this issue and stand with victims by presenting my private member's bill, C-246, the Ending Sentences Reductions for Sexual Predators Act. This bill is simple, it's direct, and it's necessary. It mandates consecutive sentencing, not concurrent sentencing, for those convicted of sexual offenses. In plain terms, no more bundling crimes into one low-price package, no more sentencing discounts. Sexual predators will no longer be able to compress their crimes and walk away with a reduced amount of time in jail. Instead, each crime will carry its own penalty, and each victim will receive the full recognition that she or he deserves. Under this law, every victim counts, not just as in a moral or symbolic sense, but really counts. Their voice counts. What happened to them counts. The crime committed against them matters and should be paid for. Currently, Canada does not allow for consecutive sentences in these types of cases. It does, however, allow for them when it's to do with children. And while that protection for children is absolutely right and necessary, the logic behind that allowance equally applies to adult victims. Consider this, if you will, just for a moment. In Canada, the maximum sentence for a break-in or a violent robbery is life in prison. Life. That's the maximum sentence. But the maximum penalty for sexual violence against an adult is only 10 years. And it's 14 years when that victim is under the age of 16. We have to sit with this comparison for a moment. A property crime, a robbery, carries a higher maximum sentence than the violent theft of a person's bodily autonomy. A home can be repaired, a stolen phone can be replaced, but restoring a person's dignity, restoring a person's sense of security, their trust in the world, those wounds are far deeper and take far more to heal. Therefore, the penalty should also be far more. The fact that our justice system punishes property crimes more severely than sexual offenses is not just inconsistent, but I would say it's altogether an injustice to those that face these types of crimes. For far too long, the scales have been tipped in favor of the criminal, the offender, while victims are left struggling, having to pull the pieces together and find healing for the egregious crimes committed against them. Years of soft-on-crime policies have left communities less safe and victims increasingly vulnerable. Since 2015, sexual assaults in Canada are up nearly 75%. Offenses against children are up an alarming 120%. And these aren't just abstract percentages. These aren't mere data points for academic purposes. These are numbers representing real people with real stories, lives forever changed. Each statistic represents betrayal and fear and lifelong consequences that impact generally not only the victim, but his or her family, friends, community. In Toronto, a family doctor was charged with 9 counts of sexual assault and 4 counts of sexual exploitation involving 3 patients over a period of time. These patients walked into his clinic expecting care and compassion and professionalism from this individual, and instead they were preyed upon by someone in whom they placed trust. They left not with healing, but with deep wounds, not having been cared for, but having been exploited. And what was the sentence for this physician who committed more than a dozen intrusive and grave crimes? 3.5 years. 3.5 years. 13 heinous crimes, 1 sentence, because all of them were enmeshed into one. Think about the societal message that is delivered. What message is sent to other victims who are terrified to come forward? It tells them that their suffering will be compressed, that their voice doesn't matter. What message is sent to other potential offenders? Well, it tells them that even if you hurt multiple people, commit multiple crimes, the system will protect them. It will have their back. And what message does it send regarding the societal value that we place on making sure that people are kept safe in the most vulnerable spaces, such as the medical office they enter into. It suggests that even profound violations committed under the guise of care are somehow eligible for a discount. And it reaffirms to victims that the justice system does not stand with them, but rather on the side of the perpetrator. Kashif Ramzan, he pretended to be a talent agent, attracting young people into the modeling industry. 2 young women were lured in, and they faced horror instead of opportunity. They were both sexually assaulted numerous times over. At the end of the day, Ramzan pleaded guilty and did not refute any of the accusations that were brought against him. The sentence he faced, 18 months for the one, 2 years for the other. But in this country, 18 months plus 24 months equals 24 months, because it's multiple sentences combined into one being served. And again, we must ask, what message does this send to society? What message is sent to young women who are already navigating a world where exploitation all too often hides behind charm and flattery and supposed opportunity? It tells them that if they are victimized, the system doesn't have their back. It tells them that their dreams can be weaponized against them, that they can be exploited, and it's not as big of a deal if it's more than one of them. It tells the public, especially these young women, that predators may face only a fraction of the punishment their crimes deserve. Meanwhile, they are expected to sort through the pieces of their own brokenness. This is the opposite of justice. It is the opposite of deterrence. It is the opposite of what a healthy society should signal about the seriousness of sexual violence. When the system merges multiple victims into a single punishment, it erases the individuality of their suffering, the weight of each of their experiences. It tells victims implicitly, if not explicitly, that their pain is worth less. That the law sees them not as unique human beings, deserving of justice, but as tally marks on a spreadsheet. Whether a predator commits repeated offenses against one person or single offenses against multiple people, justice demands that each of those crimes be paid for. Sentences must be served consecutively, not concurrently. This reflects the extent of the harm done. Anything less is a betrayal of victims. Colleagues, it is long past time to put victims first. Sexual offenses should never be treated like a 2-for-1 deal at the shoe store checkout. There is no buy one assault, get one free. But that is what our current justice system does. There is no bulk discount on human suffering, but that is what our courts reward. Each offense is, in fact, a distinct harm. Each victim is a whole person, and each act must carry with it its own consequences. Justice is not something to be discounted or bundled. Justice demands full recognition and full accountability for every crime and every victim. My bill, Bill C-246, is about restoring that balance. It's about ensuring that the law stands firmly on the side of victims, not with predators. It's about making sure that when a sexual offender is sentenced, the punishment truly reflects the crime. It's about restoring faith in our justice system for survivors who have so often been let down And it's about sending a clear message to society that sexual violence is serious, that it will not be tolerated, that every victim matters, and that predators will face real, meaningful consequences. So my appeal to those in this place, to my colleagues from all parties, I would ask that you support this bill, that you stand on the side of victims, that together we stand for a strong, robust justice system, a system that refuses to minimize the most violating crimes a person can endure, that we would be a group of people that instead stands for what is right. I'm asking you to support this bill, and let us send a united message from the House of Commons that we stand with the innocent, that we stand with the victims, that we stand with the survivors, and that sexual predators will, in fact, face the full force of the law.
Criminal Code concerning consecutive sentences for sexual offenses. This is a private member's bill brought forward by the Honourable Member of Lethbridge. This bill would replace the existing criminal code provision that requires sentencing courts to impose consecutive sentences in child sexual offenses case with one that would require consecutive sentences for all other sexual offenses. In cases where an offender is already serving a sentence for a sexual offense, it would require a new sentence for a sexual offense to run consecutively to the sentence the offender is already serving. I appreciate the sponsor's aim of signaling the seriousness of sexual offenses by requiring mandatory consecutive sentences in cases involving multiple sexual offense convictions. I would note, however, that Bill C-246 is the wrong approach. It is unconstitutional, overly rigid, and will not make Canadians safer. This bill seeks to force judges to stack consecutive sentences for all sexual offenses, including those that already carry mandatory minimum penalties. The Supreme Court, in cases like Senneville, has emphasized that judges must consider reasonable hypotheticals when determining when a sentence is grossly disproportionate. And the Quebec Court of Appeal in Vera Camacho struck down part of the existing consecutive sentencing framework for sexual offenders against children because it would result in sentences that are grossly disproportionate and unconstitutional. Yet, the Conservatives propose to expand this fragile provision to include adult sexual offenses. This approach is reckless. It would remove judicial discretion entirely, prevent judges from applying the totality principle, risk grossly disproportionate global sentences, discourage early guilty pleas, lengthen trials unnecessarily, and put increased pressure on provincial courts and correctional facilities, all without any evidence that it reduces reoffending. This is why our government has adopted a different evidence-based and constitutionally sound approach. Through Bill C-14, the Bail and Sentencing Reform Act, we are strengthening the justice system while keeping victims at the center and core of our focus. How? 1. Tougher bail rules. C-14 makes it harder for serious sexual offenders to be released before trial, introducing a reverse onus for assault and sexual assault involving choking, suffocation, or strangulation, behaviors linked to the escalation to homicide. 2. Ending house arrest for serious sexual offenses. Conditional sentences have been proven insufficient for serious sexual offenses, particularly those involving children. C-14 ensures that offenders serve sentences reflecting the gravity of their crimes. 3. Consecutive sentences for repeat offenders, as mentioned by my honourable member from the bloc before. C-14 allows judges to consider consecutive sentences for repeat violent sexual offenders while preserving discretion to ensure outcomes remain proportionate, fair, and constitutional. These measures, Mr. Speaker, reflect our commitment to victim-centered, charter-compliant reforms. Unlike the Conservatives who prioritize ideology over evidence, we are strengthening public safety without creating legal chaos. Mr. Speaker, let's also remember C-2, which equips police with lawful tools they need to catch predators before they commit crimes. You know, Mr. Speaker, what survivors and families of victims have been telling us is the need for less toxic rhetoric around intimate partner violence and urge Parliament to act responsibly. For example, yesterday the House unanimously adopted Conservative Bill C-245 on fighting intimate partner violence, as we intend to amend the bill in the Justice Committee and strengthen it to protect women who would act in self-defense from being wrongfully charged with a first-degree murder. This is the spirit we've shown that we can work together and protect Canadians and protect their lives. Unfortunately, the Conservatives continue to delay critical legislation, wasting committee time debating irrelevant matters, while women organizations across the country have called for urgent action. So I ask the member opposite, will she support passing these bills before the House rises? Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, before the House rises, the Minister will table legislation addressing gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, child protection, and court delays. These measures are crafted with victims in mind, reflecting their lived experiences and the realities they face. We hope the Conservatives will refrain from obstruction and join and support our legislation. Thank you.
Resuming debate, reprise de débat.
Speaker, normally I have a couple of notes, but you're going to see me at first start with no notes, and I'm going to speak directly to the Liberals here, because I can't believe what we just heard from the Parliamentary Secretary. In fact, whoever wrote that speech should be ashamed of themselves. They should be ashamed because they just got the law completely wrong. They talked about the unconstitutionality of this provision. Well, if this provision is unconstitutional, then the provision that is identical to it, the one that says consecutive sentences for sex offenses against kids, is unconstitutional itself. I cannot believe that, Mr. Speaker. And yes, I am raising my voice, and yes, I'm speaking with passion. Why? Because victims serve a psychological life sentence. And the Liberals here are communicating to this House, to Canadians, that this doesn't need to be changed, that it is okay for sex offenses to be cheaper by the dozen. It is wrong. The Liberals can scoff, they can snarl under their breath, or they can do something. They can ask the person who wrote that speech, the person who delivered that speech, what are we thinking when we talk about Bill C-14, a bill on bail? When this bill, all this bill says, and I consulted with the honourable member on it, and I reflected on my life prosecuting sex offences against kids, also teaching sentencing class at our local law school, talking about the totality principle that member spoke about. The totality principle says that somebody's overall moral culpability should not exceed the length of sentence, that it should be proportional. And somehow this offends the totality principle? What? Well, if this offends it, then the provision that this was designed on, to say that everybody who hurts a kid should serve a consecutive sentence. If anybody wants a real-life example, I'll tell them one. The first case that I undertook that really taught me about this, a case on internet luring. The offender was located in Canada. The victims were in the Philippines. And I'll just give a warning here. This is graphic, so if anybody doesn't want to hear it, please. That offender, a Canadian, was paying mothers to offend against their children. And yes, it's uncomfortable, but this is what's happening. He pled guilty to several charges, and because of that, there were consecutive sentences. Now, based on that speech, one would say that that was wrong, that he should have consecutive sentences. And you know what? The totality principle still applied. How is it possible that anybody in this House could disagree with the fact that if somebody sexually assaults one person and sexually assaults somebody else in 90 days, and sexually assaults another person in 90 days, and so on, should not serve consecutive sentences? Those sentences can be fashioned in accordance with the totality principle to reflect the overall moral culpability of that person. So I say to the Liberals who are here, are you okay with this? Are you okay with signaling, with getting behind the contents of that speech? I challenge every single one of you to go back and reflect on that in your caucus. I texted somebody, an advocate for sexual assault survivors, somebody who herself was sexually assaulted and speaks about it publicly. We need to remember, and I forget this sometimes too, and sometimes I joke around in this House, sometimes I have more fun, but I've always believed politics was about timing. There's a time to have fun, there's a time to be righteously angry, there's a time to be serious, there's a time to be loud, there's a time to be quiet. If ever there was a time to be loud in this House, this is it. If ever there was a time for the Liberals present in this House to say, are we sure we want to say we don't want to tie judges' hands? Like, is that what I heard, Mr. Speaker? We don't want to tie the hands of judges when it comes to consecutive sentences for sexual assault. Did I hear that? And do I see that the Liberals across the way are okay with it? Because victims are going to be watching. That speech will be dissected. And let's not forget, our words in here mean something. If we can't agree on that, what the heck can we agree on? And what I find even more reprehensible is that somebody said, you know what, we should not throw the full force of the law against sexual offenders. Those victims are serving a life sentence, a psychological life sentence. And I just heard why we should not apply the full force of the law to them. But support Bill C-14, because boy is it tough on crime. What a joke. We are debating whether people should serve an appropriate sentence for sexual assault. I'm thinking to myself, well, duh. Of course they should. And I don't care if they hear me on Wellington Street saying this. We have come to the point where people serve more time on a maximum sentence for property crimes. Robbery is taking property by force. The maximum sentence is life imprisonment. Sexual assault is taking sexual dignity by force, sexual inviolability by force, sexual integrity by force, and the maximum sentence is 10 years. And what do we hear from the Liberals? They didn't say whether they would vote for or against this. And if you are watching this at home through you, Mr. Speaker, I would say contact my office, contact every Liberal, and say to them, there should be proportionality in sentencing, because for far too long, we have measured sexual assault sentences in months instead of years. And I remember I was obedient to the rule of law, the rule of precedent, as somebody who practiced law. I may not have agreed, but I was obedient to the precedents. Does anybody know here, I'm speaking rhetorically, about the range for a sexual assault involving intercourse in British Columbia? It starts at 2 years. And that speech says, the Liberal position says that if it's done again to another victim, it shouldn't necessarily be consecutive. 2 years. 2 years for the violation of somebody's sexual integrity. And yeah, there's a bit of awkwardness in the House right now because there should be. When we allow stuff like this to be said in this House, when we don't stand up for victims in this House, we should all hang our heads in shame. And I hope every single one of them goes back to caucus and ask why that speech said what it said. Why are we allowing this to happen? Shame on every parliamentarian who does not fight for victims of sexual offenses in this country.
That was Frank Caputo's best speech I've ever seen him done, and he's done some great speeches. That thing came from the heart. Message your MP. We want the consecutive sentencing. I'll see you on the next report.